Some of the most incredible stories are the tales of ordinary and extraordinary people doing amazing things or living through unbelievable events. Not everyone is a hero or an inventor or a world changer. These are stories of bravery, cunning, courage, wit, and seemingly impossible odds in the lives of real people. This is the Everyone Has a Story podcast, episode number 24, A Decisive Step. The weather had turned, just like he knew it would. He just didn't think it would happen so quickly. He'd wanted to get in one last day of trout fishing before the onset of winter, and he'd rolled the dice on this outing. But the weather dice didn't fall in his favor that October day in 1993. After a morning spent fly fishing near St. Mary's Glacier in the mountains west of Denver, the autumn sky became cloudy and the air grew cold. It wouldn't be long before dark. The fishing was good at this remote lake. It was hard to reach, surrounded by steep ridges, and remained practically undisturbed. A confident 38-year-old Bill headed across a boulder field carrying his tackle. Traversing those rocks was challenging, even for such an avid outdoorsman. Losing his footing, Bill slipped and simultaneously dislodged an unstable rock. Without warning, the boulder shifted onto his left leg. The pain of the massive rock crushing his leg was excruciating. Even worse, Bill was pinned. He couldn't have known how, in an instant, everything would change. He'd ignored the first rule of the outdoors, never travel alone. Now he was trapped and no one knew where he was. Now he hoped someone would come by who could help. But deep inside, he knew he couldn't count on that in this secluded location. He worked for hours to free his leg. He knew it was broken. After being trapped for 3 hours, Bill felt the weather changing. Weather forecasters had predicted a snowstorm would blow in that evening. Night was approaching, and as the mountain winds reached the glaciers, the temperature would drop rapidly. Wearing only pants and a long-sleeve shirt, with no coat, Bill knew there would be no surviving the night. He faced a tough decision, literally life over limb. Taking his nylon fishing cord, he tied a makeshift tourniquet above the knee. He took out his pocket knife and began making a clean cut all the way around. Kind of like cutting into raw chicken, he thought. There was blood, but he couldn't allow himself to panic. He used hemostats from his fly fishing kit to clamp the arteries. Bill steadied his nerves and continued his field surgery. He sliced through tendons, nerves, and his patellar ligament. 30 minutes later, the femur slid out of his knee socket, and he was free. Bill crawled a half-mile to his truck and pulled himself in, where a new problem confronted him: a standard transmission. This would be a tricky drive. Undaunted, Bill managed to stick shift using his one leg to operate the clutch, accelerator, and brake. He remembered seeing a small neighborhood of mobile homes a few miles back. He needed to maneuver up a forest trail best suited for four-wheel drives. Now, it sounds easier than it was, and by that time he was experiencing serious blood loss. Fortunately, there were people around. He wasn't surprised by the looks of shock on their faces when he emerged from his truck. He too would have found himself horrified if a man with one leg cut off below the knee had stumbled into his remote neighborhood. They quickly took action, caring for him until paramedics arrived. Bill was airlifted to the University of Colorado Hospital in Denver. He immediately went into surgery, mostly to clean the debris from his wound. A helicopter returned to the accident site with a search crew to retrieve the severed limb, but too much time had passed. It couldn't be reattached. It's hard to imagine how excruciating the physical trauma and the psychological ordeal had been for Bill. But his clear thinking and steady hands were what kept him from bleeding to death from the procedure. The physicians attending to him noted that Bill had a definite presence of mind and performed the amputation with surgical precision. Perhaps it was a procedure he'd seen before. You see, Bill Jarocki had been a physician's assistant for 7 years. Ironically, his specialization was administering anesthesia. Doctors fitted Bill with a prosthetic leg, which he learned to use well. Bill became more than someone who just survived a horrifying ordeal. On the other side of his life-changing experience, Bill went back to school for further medical training, and then to help people recover abilities lost through amputation or congenital disabilities by providing them with prosthetic limbs. About his decision to perform a field amputation on his leg, he said, "I'll never know if that was the best possible decision. but I'm here. I feel lucky to be alive. That's his story. How's that for a story? I'm Rodney Powell, and you're listening to the Everyone Has a Story podcast, a production of realmedia.us. Can't wait to hear more? All you have to do is add it to your favorites, and you'll never miss an episode. I'll be back with more stories of real people because everyone has a story.